Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Discover new strategies and tactics as Susan Solovic introduced today's top business leaders and entrepreneurs to reveal their stories and insights. Now, the host of the 1% Edge, the small business expert, Susan Solovic.
Hello, and thanks for joining me. I'm Susan Solovic, and you're listening to the 1% Edge podcast. I imagine most of you listening today would agree with me that the business world today is crazy. The only thing you can really count on is change, and that's happening more rapidly than it ever has before. It can be overwhelming. Just when you think you have your business under control, something new happens. A new technology is introduced, there's a new market trend, or there's new competition that you didn't see coming. You may feel like you're constantly chasing the next big thing, and as a result, you probably aren't. It's easy to lose focus and control. I've seen many companies fade into the oblivion simply because they didn't manage to remain true to their core competencies and their customers. Well, my guest today is an expert when it comes to keeping businesses focused. He's an author, consultant, and speaker, and his client list includes many of the Fortune 500 firms, as well as small and mid-sized companies. He's written a number of excellent books, including a couple of my favorites, Be the Best at What Matters Most and Becoming a Category of One, How Extraordinary Companies Transcend Commodity and Defy Comparison. By the way, that one has a really neat cover on it too. And his latest book, yeah, it does. His latest book I'm going to have to add to my list of favorites. It's called Keep It Simple. It's in today's complex world, it's sort of like a breath of fresh air. So join me in welcoming my friend, my mentor, and a true thought leader, Joe Calloway. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Susan. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Can't complain. So good. I can't believe it. This is your 7th book. I don't know how you do it. I just finished my 5th. But I have to say, I really, really love the concept of it. Just keep it simple. Where did you get that idea?
You know, it came actually from my speaking audiences because I found myself asking a question, particularly when it was a leadership group or a group of owners or entrepreneurs. I'd say, how many of you frequently have this thought? And the thought is, I think we're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. And every hand in the room went up, including mine. And so I had a couple of people actually say to me, the part of your speech that really hit home with us was when you talked about the need to simplify and stop overthinking and stop overcomplicating. And so I thought, well, let's just do a book. And I was approached by a publisher who does a format that's very simple. It's an easy to read. I tell people you can read it on a flight, and I mean a flight from Chicago to Milwaukee. You can read it.
Oh my goodness! Well, you know what Mark Twain says. If I had more time, I would have made this shorter. Right? It's not that easy, so don't underestimate what you did there. But my last book, I was saying before we got started here, I got carpal tunnel syndrome because I was sitting there typing for so many hours. So keep it simple. That's great advice. Why do we always tend to make things so much more complicated? I know I'm guilty of that. I run around and I get stressed out and overwhelmed. So why do we do that as human beings?
You just hit on it with the Mark Twain quote, which was, if I'd had more time, I would have made it shorter. It's easier to make things complicated. It's easy to overthink things. Listen, my favorite quote about this is from Steve Jobs. And Jobs said, it takes a lot of really, really hard work to get your thinking clean enough to make things simple. But it's worth the work because if you can make things simple, you can move mountains. And I really do think that's it. It's the path of least resistance to make things complicated. And to keep talking about them forever and ever and ever instead of making it simple, making a decision, and taking action.
I'm just curious. Do you think that a lot of people use that as an excuse, like they procrastinate because, well, we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and use that overthinking as sort of like the reason for not getting anything done?
Yeah, I think we do. It's funny. I was reading an article just yesterday. It was a Harvard Business Review article, and it said that an extensive study they had done about truly effective CEOs, they came up with 4 qualities, and one of them was quick decisions. The ability, listen, and I love this, Susan, The thinking was, if you feel like the chances are 60%, 60 that you're right, do it. Go. Because making a decision is almost always better than just waiting and waiting and waiting. Because, as you said in your opening, things move so quickly, things change so quickly, that if you take a year to think about it, that opportunity is going to be so over, so long gone that you will have missed the window. So yeah, I think we just procrastinate because it's easier to procrastinate than doing the thing that is of the greatest benefit, which is making a decision and taking action.
I used to work for a boss who always said, do something, even if it's wrong, do something, move. Because if you're not moving today, you're actually going backwards. Now, Joe, you teach leaders a method that you now call your 3 things to succeed. Explain that to us. How does that work?
Simplest idea in the world. It's so effective. A lot of companies that I know use it. I use it. And it's simply this. What are the 3 things that you have to do and do extremely well every single day to succeed? The 3 things. I'll give you my favorite example. It's a client of mine, Old Dominion Freight Line. It's a trucking company. Incredibly complex logistically, but what they've done is they've said, and this applies to every employee in the company, nope, we've only got to get 3 things right. Number 1, pick it up when you said you would. Number 2, deliver it when you said you would. And number 3, deliver it intact and all there. And so what they've done is taken this huge, complex international business and boiled it down to 3 critical components. And everybody, I've got the tiniest business in the world. I use the same concept. There are 3 things that when I get up in the morning, there's no question about what I need to do. I'm going to do those 3 things and get them right. And so it's just a way of organizing your thinking that forces simplicity.
I love that. I actually built a new home in Florida and ordered some plantation shutters, right? The guy said, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks. Well, I started calling after that period, I'll check on it. Never called me back. I was the one who called. And try about, 12 weeks later, they finally came in. And I said, I don't want to do business with you anymore. It wasn't about the quality of the work. It was about that he didn't do what he said he was going to do. Exactly. You also, Joe, talk about the power of saying no. And I had to actually laugh a little bit when I read that because in my very, very first book, eons ago, called The Girl's Guide to Power and Success, I talked to women about the power of saying no, because I think a lot of women don't want to hurt people's feelings, so they feel obligated and they say yes. And so, but you've actually broadened that. Now you're saying as business leaders, we have to learn to say no.
Well, here's my favorite current quote, Warren Buffett, who said, the difference between successful people and very successful people is that very successful people say no to almost everything. And a lot of people say, no, wait a minute, that's backwards, isn't it? If you're going to be successful and create opportunity, aren't you supposed to say yes? Buffett's point is this. Really successful people, highly effective people, have absolutely zeroed in on what is most important. And they know the difference between an opportunity and a distraction. And so, the great power of saying no is it weeds out the distractions and keeps you focused on what you ought to say yes to. Beyond work, I think one of the great benefits of getting older is you start to say no to stuff you don't want to do. The party that you say yes to, and then the day of the party you're thinking, why did I say yes to this? I don't even want to go. Well, I swear, I think it comes from getting older. You start to say, no, I don't want to do that. No.
Yeah.
And the more you say no, as it turns out, the better your life, the better your business becomes.
I agree with that. I read somewhere where Oprah said once, there's nothing wrong with saying no. You don't have to apologize. It's when you start up making up excuses or those little white lies or things that slip in because you really don't want to do it, and then you make an excuse not to do it, and that's a shame. Yeah, totally. And I'm like you, Joe. The older I get, I remember when I was in the corporate world, one of the guys who worked for me, he was a little bit older than I was at the time, he said, Susan, you're like the hungry baseball player. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, you're just out there, you're going for it, you're working hard. And, I think the older I get now, I realize, like, okay, you can do a lot of things, you just can't do it all at the same time. So you just pick and choose.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges for business owners and leaders today, particularly those who are really looking to grow their organizations in this crazy world we're living in?
I think the single biggest challenge is to stay relevant, and particularly to stay relevant in the face of changing technology and competition, new competitors that are disrupting and redefining. I know that in our world, I think that's absolutely one of our biggest challenges is to stay relevant to our clients. But I think it's true of the business world in general. How do I stay current, much less one step ahead of changes in what customers expect? I'll tell you I think the greatest guidelines is if you can make something easier for customers, that's a huge advantage in the marketplace. The great example of that would have to be Uber.
Right.
People say, well, Uber disrupted business. Yeah, and you know how they did it? They made it easier to get a ride.
Exactly.
I mean, that was the big disruption. They just made something easier.
Right. I actually, in one of my speeches I was giving this past weekend, I held up a pair of men's socks, from Joseph Banks, whatever. And I said, men's socks, what's the big deal about men's socks? And I remember when my dad started wearing gold-toed socks. I mean, that was the big innovative things with men's socks, right? But somebody saw this opportunity, and now, you can subscribe to the Socks of the Month Club, and there are all these crazy designs, and it's an accessory. And, that's not really anything really super hard to do. They didn't really reinvent the wheel. They just tweaked it. Just that little difference that sets them apart and is creating that opportunity for them. So good for them.
I think it was Hanes that was the first to take the tag out of the T-shirt.
Oh, is that right?
And went instead of having the tag that scratched you. And you're right. It's little things.
Little things. I mean, it's just, and sometimes it's so obvious, but we just get used to doing things. It's like with their habits, right? It's like you get on autopilot when you're driving someplace and you wake up and say, where was I going, right? So we can't do that in our businesses today. But let me ask you to share with some of the companies that you think that we could really learn from.
I had a great experience a little over a year ago. I spent a year as the executive in residence at Belmont University's Center for Entrepreneurship. I worked with college, mostly seniors who had started businesses, and it really got me tuned into looking at startups. And now I study startups of all kinds, looking for, okay, what are they seeing in their industry that I can transfer to my business? And so I think we can learn from any company that looks at what they do with new eyes and it isn't tied down by the assumptions of the way that it's done. So I'm always looking for new thinking about any kind of business.
I think we can learn a lot from each other and from other industries, and paying attention to what they're doing. I encourage audiences to take a look around them and say, is there something in that industry or the way that group is doing business that could apply to my business? There is a lot to learn. So I am going to put you on the spot, though, Joe, because you are in your own business and we are in the similar business here. What's your business challenge, and how are you dealing with that?
Oh, my biggest challenge, I'll go back to what I said for everybody else, and that's probably why I said it, because it's so top of mind for me. My biggest challenge, and you can back me up on this, I work in a business that has been flooded with new talent into that business over the last 5 years. And so I've got, where there used to be 5 people up for a job. Now there's 25 people up for the same job, and they're good. They're good at what they do. And so I go back to that staying relevant. I've got to stay relevant and provide solutions that create value for my clients. Keep talking. I've got to take 1 second and take care of a dog that's barking. I'll be right
I love it. You know,
Keep
Joe,
talking.
I certainly will, because I'll tell you right now, one of the things that I have in my office, actually, I have 2 new 9-week-old Shih Tzu puppies. So they're sleeping right now. So I totally understand that issue. But, you know, the interesting thing, talking about giving companies a competitive edge and staying relative, you know, you need good talent. And ironically, the research shows that companies that allow their employees to bring their furry 4-legged friends to the office place, actually, you know, the employees see that as a great benefit and a big perk. So if you're a smaller company, you can't afford to compete, well, you know, you might be something you want to think about. Is bring that little puppy dog to work with you.
Well,
So
yeah, anything. I was speaking in Las Vegas just a couple of days ago, and I said to them that their single greatest competitive advantage was having loyal team members who love to go to work.
Yeah.
And if you can create that, you've got
Totally.
an advantage. No
Totally.
question.
Totally. Well, Joe, how can everybody find you if they want to learn more about Keeping It Simple or your other books that you've written?
Just go to the website, which is my name, Joe Calloway, and it's Calloway, joecalloway.com. There's free videos, there's a blog, there's all sorts of stuff. I'd love for them to go look around.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got an offer here where they can get 21 short videos from you on the website.
Yep.
And so we're going to put a link up to that so everybody can easily access it. And also your social media, you're out there. I see you all the time. So we'll put all your social media handles and platforms out there as well. Yeah, great. Well, Joe, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. And I want you to remember, you know, you really want to look up Joe's books, because I promise it's going to enhance the way you're doing business, and you'll be thanking Joe for his sage advice and how he's helping you. And I hope you'll continue to listen to the 1% Edge podcast, because each week I'm going to bring you another expert, the best of the best, so you can be the best at your business. So here's to your success and getting the edge. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for listening to the 1% Edge. If you found these insights and tips helpful, be sure to hit the subscribe button on your podcast player and leave a review in iTunes to help others discover the 1% Edge.